Hi, I'm Emile Heskey, and join me on the hero's journey.
Hey guys, welcome to the hero's journey with Emile Heskey. I'm Warren Williams, and this is episode 3. So today kind of signals the first of our podcasts where we're joined by a guest who's a friend of mine, who has been in the football field for quite some time. So we're going to kind of get into his journey. So Mark, if you'd just like to introduce yourself and just summarize what your career path is right now. So when I say that, I mean just tell everybody what you do currently and just give us your full name.
Hey guys, Mark Wilson. I'm a football agent.
Cool. So as you guys know from the theme of what we've done before, what we're really doing is exploring a lot of the challenges that people in the world go through, but particularly sports. And it'll be interesting to talk to Mark because I've worked with Mark for a couple of years with some of his clients and also with himself for some other structural issues. And coming from the football agent point of view, it'll be really interesting to kind of get his perspective on the challenges of working on both sides, because as Mark will explain, he's kind of dabbled on the other side as a footballer and then shifted and transitioned to the opposite side of that as a football agent. So it'll be really interesting to get his perspective on the hero journey, some of the challenges he's gone through, the highs and the lows, and his perspective on life. And as always, we're joined by the man, Emile Heskey. If you just want to say hi.
Hey guys, how you doing?
All right,
Yeah,
so Mark, let's kind of get into it. So if you can just start off by kind of sharing your background, how you got into football, because I understand that you were an avid footballer. Can you actually share, just kind of summarize how you got into football, first of all, and then what challenges you faced growing up playing football in the area that you played up in, and also where did you start playing football, as in the UK and so on?
Right, so first of all, let's clarify. You can't be calling me a footballer in the presence of a Liverpool and England international. I was technically, I was a footballer because the definition of a footballer is somebody who gets paid more than their expenses to play the game. But however, I was a semi-professional footballer, so playing in the lower leagues.
It's still classed as a footballer. You were going to train. You were getting paid. You were turning up. You were playing the games. You had fans watching you.
This is true. Probably never more than 50, but. Yeah, that's very kind of you, Emile. No, I was a semi-professional footballer. Quite interesting actually, because I probably did have the talent to be a professional in the sense of playing for like a League One or League Two team. But talking about the journey, it's quite interesting because when I was younger, I didn't really have a good attitude, which probably curtailed my career down that path. But it's worked out fine anyway.
In what sense, Mark, a good attitude?
So when I was 18, I was playing for a club called Wealdstone, which is quite famous because Stuart Pearce and Vinnie Jones came from the same team.
Okay.
And there was a manager called, I've forgotten his name now. Could have been Fred Callahan. He was he was an ex-Fulham player, I think, and possibly Fulham manager. And I was just a bit mouthy and a bit leery. And we got into an altercation one day on the way back from Margate when we'd lost 3-0. And I wasn't really aware that how managers were feeling at the time. And he was a big guy at the time, and he bought everybody fish and chips and himself a kebab.
Yeah.
And I shouted out, "Kebab!" And then he came and he threatened to throw me through the window of the bus. So, and it kind of went downhill from there. So yeah, I was just like I said, a bit mouthy and probably didn't have the best attitude to life. Not really to football, because the football wasn't really the issue. It was more kind of
it was probably you didn't understand the politics of football, of how to act within football.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. So that was me. That was many years ago when I was young and naive. But obviously, I can pass that experience on, like you rightly said, the politics of football, how to represent yourself, to others and so forth. But here we are. So yeah. But just to clarify that point, yeah, that was very kind of both of you to say I was a footballer, but no, I was a semi-pro footballer for a little bit.
So yeah, just to kind of go back for a second, just a few things, because I was want to kind of go back a little bit, because part of what we do with the hero's journey is kind of talk about how everybody goes through this inner calling here, where obviously when you're a young child, you may want to be a president or a prime minister or a doctor or whatever. And those are partly the dreams that we have, or aspirations. We first of all find our heroes, people that we aspire to become a part of. For you, because everyone goes through this what we call the call to adventure, this initial stage where something inspires you to want to become a footballer. Can you kind of just relay to people listening, what was it that initially first attracted you to the idea of playing football in the first place?
I remember first started playing football when I was probably about 9, and there was an Irish girl on the school playground called Rowena. That's all I remember, and she kind of taught me how to play football, and it went from there. And then I joined a local team. And then, John Barnes was probably my first real idol. And then bought the Liverpool kit, even though I'm a Spurs fan now.
Before you go from Liverpool to Spurs, that's another question later.
That is Well, listen, when I grew up in Harrow, so at the time we had the three main clubs that people supported were Watford, QPR, 4 main clubs, I should say, Tottenham or Arsenal. So, John Barnes was the reason I supported Liverpool, but obviously, I was never going to go and watch any matches up in Liverpool, living in North London. So, Tottenham was a club that I could go and watch and identify with. And to be fair, I'd always kind of followed Tottenham. I don't know why, from the '87 Cup final. So Tottenham was my London team, and I had that '87 Cup final kit when Clive Allen scored the goal in the second minute, and then from there it was kind of John Barnes was always an idol. But it's a good point that you make, Warren. I mean, it was always about kind of identifying with idols, and if we look at identity, hopefully not going off the point, up until about 1990, I identified with England. And then growing up, so I would have been 14 at the time, growing up, England didn't qualify for the 94 World Cup. And I wanted to support a team. I wanted to feel like I was involved, when watching games. So Football Italia was on Channel 4, was quite popular at the time. So I watched a lot of Italian football. And then I just completely switched my allegiance to supporting Italy. And I have since the 94 World Cup. And that was it. And I fell in love with Italian football. Gianluca Vialli was my original favourite player, and I progressed onto Roberto Baggio. But those, to answer your original question, those were the guys I wanted to try and emulate.
Cool. And I'm not sure how Emile feels about you supporting Italy, especially when those are the times when Emile was actually an England team.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You gravitate. The thing is, within sports and within life, you gravitate to what you're familiar with and what you aspire to be. And you look at a lot of Caribbean, I would say, people of Caribbean descent. When you ask them about their first national team, it's England. But then if Jamaica's in the World Cup, there's no comparison. You've totally forgot about England.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and when you look at cricket,
that's right.
When Sir Viv Richards was mashing up everyone, that's who you're supporting.
Yeah.
You don't care about anything. You walk into work or walk into school with your head held high, because you know at that time West Indies were the best in the world.
Yes. Yeah. Not so much now, but you're right.
You know, they're coming back. The things you got to remember then, the sport was the number one sport in the Caribbean. Now they've got so many different sports to choose from. They don't know what to choose. So cricket's taken a bit of a back seat for the Caribbean.
Right. So, and then now kind of moving on with that whole growing up phase and the heroes and stuff. Part of the hero's journey is meeting your mentor, which is the point where you feel like, you know what, I've had this kind of fantasy idea with playing football. Now I actually need some guidance because I'm kind of thinking about taking this more seriously. Was there a point where you had a specific mentor, inspirational person that you physically knew, someone that you kind of followed that kind of was helping to wean you into the sport of football?
There was always, we grew up playing football down the park, which is a park in Harrow called Byron Park, with a lot of players from Wiltstone area used to go and play behind Harrow Leisure Centre. And, you know, they were fun times and really good games. Those were the games where you would play 20 aside and you know, literally, I know it's a bit cliche, but you'd be playing from after school until, you know, until it got dark. And then sometimes we used to even go over to the car park because we had lights and move the game over onto the concrete. But there was a guy called Ray Robinson who is the father, not the boxer, is the father of a player who went on to become a professional at Bournemouth called Anton Robinson. And he, I would say, was probably somebody who kind of mentored me and, you know, made me realize actually that I could probably make a living in the game.
Cool. And then, so what age was that?
That was from, I'd say, about 14 to 18 to start when I started playing semi-professional. But then, obviously, I realized it's quite funny because if you look at you know, I think I've touched on this before. I did a dissertation about why there's no Asian professional footballers or relatively not many. I think there's only been a few. And one of the things we looked at when I did it, that was Brunel University, probably early 2000s, was the parental influence and whether they pushed their children into playing professional football or whether they focused on their study. And my father was someone who was vehemently, listen, you need to be studying. You're never going to be good enough to be a footballer. So I never was ever encouraged to become a footballer because my father went down the study route and thought that if I hadn't made it by a certain age, like some of my classmates who were playing for QPR at the time, then, you know, I didn't get that kind of push and support to go into football. So what happened was I was at college at the same time, and my form tutor, his first name was Paul. I've forgotten his surname now. He basically said to me, listen, if you don't make it, here's your backup plan. You're going to go to Luton University, or University of Luton as it was called then. Now I think it's University of Bedfordshire, and you're going to study sociology. So that was the backup plan. I fell out with the coach as spectacularly as I told you on the bus on the way back from Margate, and that was it. I went to uni and studied sociology, and the rest was history. And I decided to take a different path continue playing semi-pro while going to uni, and I went down the youth and community work path.
Cool. So just before we continue on back, because I wanted to kind of get to where you transitioned to the football agent side of things, but just because you touched on something that's really interesting, I'd like to get Emile's thoughts on this as well. You were talking about this dissertation that you did and the Asians, but I'm not sure if you'd gotten to a conclusion on your thoughts. I know you said part of it was relating to the parents pushing them or not. Had you completed your thoughts on what you were sharing about your reasoning as to why you believed Asians in general aren't really prominent in the football?
Yeah, I mean, the conclusion in like I said, that we're going back 17 years ago. The conclusion of the dissertation was that it was racism. So, for example, racism can be such an ugly word, but in this instance, it was more, it encompassed the kind of overview of a couple of things. I mean, one of the main things was it wasn't about parents not pushing their children into football, because a lot of young Asian players, when I say Asian, I was talking about Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Indian. I wasn't talking about Chinese or Japanese or South Korean. So I was talking about British-born Asians, typically from those countries. And when we grew up playing in Harrow, we used to play the five-a-side teams, and the Asian teams were fantastic, and they always used to win. And it always kind of amazed me that no one was kind of coming through. One of those, like I said, the reason was racism, but in that sense, it was, so there's no role model. So I had John Barnes to look up to and thought, oh, that looks good. This guy's a star. I want to get into football. So there's no Asian role models, really. No one can look and say, right. Then there was we looked at the physical aspect. You don't really see any Asian sprinters. When you look at the Olympic Games, the athletes are normally black or white. There's not really, people from the background. But that's changed over the years. We looked at diet as well, the Asian diet versus West India diet or British diet. But young Asians now, they're it's a myth if you think that they're still eating, traditional Indian or Pakistani foods. They're young British people who are eating whatever British food is now, chicken and chips or whatever, KFC, McDonald's, whatever they're eating. But so it's not about that. It was never about the physicality, because if you look at cricket, as we touched on earlier, the Pakistan Indian cricket team, they're not unfit. So that was the overall conclusion. And to be honest, I couldn't comment now, almost 20 years later, as to why they haven't come through, apart from the original findings. Yeah, the original findings, which were that there's just no role models for them. But that would be something interesting to look at again in the future, I think.
Emile, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the narrative was always put down to the parents saying that the parents told them that they weren't allowed to play, they were only allowed to study. But obviously your findings show that that's false. And then obviously the role models are, well, if you're not able to get anyone in the system, you're never going to create a role model for others to actually aspire to be. Another one, when I was growing up, because I grew up in Leicester, so I know what you're talking about. I grew up in an Asian area.
Okay.
I grew up playing four-a-side and five-a-side football with Asians in a youth club called. It was obviously called LAYA, Laya, Leicester Asian Youth Association.
Okay.
So I grew up with them and played with them, and I know exactly what you're talking about. So, but then there was obviously this perception that they were weak,
Yes.
There's perception that they are mentally weak as well, which in essence, I'm guessing in the 70s, 60s, 70s and 80s, the younger black community and people had to overcome as well, which we've come a long way with.
Yeah.
So, but again, we haven't really had that. Well, we've had Michael Chopra.
Yes.
It was half Indian. We've had
Zesh Rahman.
Yeah, who's Pakistani.
Yeah.
He's doing some great stuff, by the way. He's doing some great stuff to try and integrate it and trying to get people to be aware of what's going on. But it's not enough. But I'm guessing it's just a procedure as well, and it's a line of getting to somewhere. Basically, how can I put it? Getting somewhere, but you've got to get into somewhere. But there's you need someone to be given the chance to get there as well.
So let me ask you both this before we move on. Do you both feel it's important for every kind of nationality to be able to see themselves, i.e. seeing someone like, with the same sort of look as them in all sports equally represented, so that they are inspired to fulfill their potential in that particular sport?
100%, for me anyway. 100%. Now, I was growing up, like Mark said, John Barnes, I'm guessing for that era, John Barnes, Ian Wright were the key people for black people to be watching playing football. John Barnes arguably scored the best goal ever from any English player, the one against Brazil in a friendly. So you grew up watching them and aspiring to be them. But even for us now as black players and ex-black players, what's your next level? What's your next accomplishment? Management, but there's no real person in the management roles that you can say I can aspire to be. You've got so many in white and but no black ethnic people that you can actually aspire to be.
Your thoughts, Mark?
Sorry, what was the question again?
It was just about.
I'm joking.
Oh.
I know the question. It was a good answer, Emile. I think it's very complex. Do we need role models? Yes, I think we do. It's not as simple as that. Do we need role models in every sport? Maybe not, because let's take Usain Bolt as an example. Obviously, an extreme example. I don't think if you're living in Japan, you're a Japanese boy, you're growing up, and you see Usain Bolt and think, I want to be like him. I don't think it has to be a Japanese sprinter. I think they can look and identify and say, right, that's the top guy in the world I want to be. I think it's helpful. What I was kind of getting at, without probably, we don't have enough time to go into it, but the point is, it's not one, role models is one thing, but two, it's about once you've got people within a certain industry. So if you, for example, because we're talking about, we talked about, Emile said there's not enough black managers as an example. It becomes the norm. So black players, when they first started, I don't know how many, there was hardly any, there was racism, etc. Black players today, there's probably, at a guess, 25%, possibly more. And that was a few years ago. So it just becomes the norm. And that's where we need to kind of get to, really, rather than the role model per se. That's just one aspect. That helped us back then to identify, and that is a very important part. But the aspect of having people, it's not unusual to have a black player now. No one thinks, there's a black player in the team. So, although still there are evidently certain clubs which you can look round, the facts will show you in the Premier League. There's no need for me to name them. You will see the clubs that have more more continental and not so much. And I don't know whether that's indicative of the areas they grew up in or the managers, but I'm going around the houses. But the reality is, yes, it is important, but I don't think
it helps, but it's not the most important factor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So transitioning back to what we were kind of just taking you through your journey, what was the point? Where did you get to where you decided to transition from? So what age did you transition from being a footballer into a football agent, or was there an interim period where something else happened?
It happened by accident. So I was, like I said, I finished university. I went to my second uni while I was working as a youth worker in Hendon College, which then became Barnet College. And I was trying to help young people through the transition of college from the age of 16 to go to university. That was my job. And around that time, I was probably 23, 24. I started working, playing for a semi-pro club, and the managers, I don't know how it came about. They said, "Oh, we've got this really good young player. We'd like to try and get him a trial." So I was friendly with the managers, and I said, "Okay, well, no problem. I'll try and help him," because that was the job of a youth worker in my mind at that time, was to try and help people progress to whatever career path they wanted to try and achieve. So I called up some clubs. I did it. I got out a directory, called out because I don't think we would have been on the internet then. Called up some clubs and arranged some trials, and the rest is history, really. And then that was it. And then I was never intended to become a football agent. I was just trying to help and enable young people to get opportunities that weren't available to them.
So when you were doing this, did you get this deep sense of fulfillment from achieving this that you hadn't felt in football, and that's why you kind of thought, you know what, this is my passion? Or was this just, I'm not going to be good enough to be a footballer, but I want to stay in football, and this is the next best thing?
You know what? Some people have said that to me before, and I remember one of my wife's friends saying to me, "Oh, it must be really difficult trying to help people to achieve what you couldn't. Like you want to be forward." But I never really felt like that at the time, and I don't feel like that now. It was purely motivated by trying to help people. There was nothing. It wasn't about money, because I didn't even know you could get paid at that time. It was that was the motivation. So yeah, and then the motivation grew. There was definitely a sense of fulfillment, but I whether I knew it or not, I don't think consciously it was because I couldn't make it, so I want to help other people. I think it was out of a desire to help people achieve their goals. And I still get a sense of fulfillment today. I think that's just part of my character. I want to help people to achieve their dreams. Whether that's the savior complex or not, I don't know, but that's where it came from.
Well, before Emile jumps in, because I know Emile will probably have some thoughts on what you were just saying just now, and the whole idea of people saying, "Oh, maybe you just did it because you're not good enough," and all that sort of stuff. But before Emile jumps in and just shares his thoughts, one of the things I kind of wanted to say is, you know, as we talk about the universal laws and the principles of reality, there's no such thing as an accident. Nothing happens by accident. So with that in mind, I'm just wondering, do you feel, because like in boxing, as an example, a lot of boxers have far more respect for people who have put on the gloves, as I say, have put on the gloves, know what it's like to get hit, and can actually share from an experience of doing that as a boxing coach. They have far more respect for boxing coaches that have done it rather than just those who are really understandable about the sport. So based on that, do you think that, because again, there are no accidents, do you feel that the role that you're doing now is definitely more like the role that you probably should have been doing, but you had to go through this stage of knowing what it's like, the highs and lows of a footballer, and that has kind of helped you when it comes to empathy with footballers and knowing what the highs and lows are, and actually being a footballer prior to actually now facilitating footballers into football by being a football agent?
I think that's fair. I think when I look back at certain things that I was doing when I was playing football, I was actually preparing for this role as an agent without even realizing it. So I'll give you an example that stuck in my mind, which was normal to me. So the '94 World Cup, I would have been 18, I think, the USA World Cup. Mm-hmm. On VHS videotapes, not Betamax, thank God. I taped every single game, and I had them in the top of my wardrobe. And I used to watch these games over and over and over. And it's quite funny because we're talking about Bielsa, the Leeds manager, yesterday, saying about the preparation for matches and stuff. And without knowing it, I was doing it just because I was such a football geek, for want of another word. I loved it. I loved looking and learning about, right, how did this player move into this position? And it was a joy for me. It was, instead of going down to the pubs and going out, I still get mocked today for like, what are you doing now? I'm staying in watching football. I was either watching football or playing football. There was was never socialising, going to the pubs or drinking with friends at that stage. That came later at uni, to be fair. But I was always kind of preparing for that role without even realising it. And for me, it was normal. It was normal. But I remember my brother-in-law being amazed. He's a bit older than me, and saying like, "Oh, you've got all these games. You're just like, and they're just generating football knowledge." So being able to help young players and advise them technically, which is a bit of a bugbear at the minute, actually, because, sorry, just going off the point, but nobody seems to shoot with their laces anymore. And it really bothers me. I was watching the highlights of Tottenham versus Man United, and all the shots were coming from the side foot. And they're just, I don't know whether it's the new technology because the boots and the balls. But anyway, I'm going off the point. It does bother me. It's like, put your laces through the ball. Maybe I'm too old school. I don't know. Emile, do you have an opinion on that?
It's just changed, doesn't it? The game has changed a lot, and now everyone with the technology and everything, and you see all these people on YouTube doing knuckleball, this ball, that ball. But like you say, no one actually strikes the ball true to the way it was years ago. You actually, as an agent, go above and beyond what a general agent would do, because generally agents don't watch that many games and study techniques and study this and that. They just do it's a business, and they do the business side of it, which is when you need a move, or when you need to negotiate with Nike, or when you need to negotiate with this sponsor.
Yes.
That's what he's doing. You're actually doing a coach's role, aren't you?
Well, you know what? I guess I am, but that's another kind of point.
Added bonus.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, okay, I'd like to, for me, it's a passion, and because I've done all that. I'm never trying to replace a coach, but it's nice when you say to a player, okay, listen, if you do this differently, or if you move here, or if you take your run up, take a couple steps back and take a run up, and you're going to win the header. And then you watch the highlights on the next match, and they're doing it. That's I see that as help. It helps me. It helps the player first of all. Mm-hmm. And as an agent, I'm only as good as my player. So luckily, yeah, you're right. It is more of a coaching role. I'll probably come on in a minute about how I got to learn all the business side of it, but I'll let Warren introduce that segue.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because as I was just typing a little while ago to you guys, because I don't want to break your flow, but we've got less than 10 minutes left on this call, so it would be great for us to have a part 2, because what I really want to kind of get to at some point is to focus on the challenges that you've gone through as an agent. And because part of the learning, as we always say, this saying that's been kind of banded around a lot recently, is you either win or you learn. So, what did you learn as part of some of the challenges? You went through some of the highs and lows. So I think we'll share that on a part 2, because I like where a lot of this stuff is going. But yeah, I mean, I think, as they say, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And that's definitely the difference when it comes to the passion, and kind of tying into what Emile was kind of saying to you just now. Do you feel that you have a unique kind of position as a football agent who has more of a passion for the sport of football, rather than somebody who's looking at football and footballers as a commodity?
I think I definitely don't make as much money as the people who view it that way, because a few people have said in the past that I'm too kind, I'm too nice to be an agent. But I never wanted to fulfill this stereotype of having to be a certain way, or having to, not being a nice guy or not being me. I just want to be me in the job. And if that pays well, then great. And if it doesn't, then, at least I've stayed true to myself. But it kind of bothers me that, we when agents still get bandied about with this money going out of the game. I mean, it's really draconian, and so old school when people are saying that, because we're part of the game now.
Yeah. Can you just expand on that? Because that's something. Because obviously you and Emile are both in the football world, and I'm looking at it from the outside in. So just for those who may not know this, because obviously our goal is to make sure this reaches out not just to football fans, but just fans of growth and stuff in general. So just can you expand on that, about this statement you made about agents moving out of the game, kind of dropping out of the game?
It's money out of the game. So people in the game, and and now there's no excuse for anyone to say it, because if anybody wants to have a go as an agent, they can now. They can. You could. Intermediaries. There you go. Intermediaries. So anybody who wants to sign up, it takes 5 minutes. You go online to the FA, you sign up, you pay I think it's £500 plus VAT, and you're an intermediary. So anyone can have a go. Many years ago, it was very exclusive, and you had to have a bond of £100,000 or something. Started off, and then they changed that and said, okay, well, you can get insured for it. So I think and then you had to. Now there's no exams. There's nothing you can do it. But it's about agents being included in the game and being inclusive. So it's just a nonsense expression when people say money going out of the game, because a player gets paid their wages, or a manager, backroom staff, a physio. They take their wages. They don't put it back into the game. So it doesn't it's never makes sense to me where an agent gets paid for doing a job. But everybody's got their opinions, and everybody's entitled to it. But I think the people who say that are, they're not really understanding that football's a business now.
I'm guessing that a lot of it's smoke screens as well. I'm guessing that you've got to account for where certain money's going, and agents are generally branded as the enemy. So you can actually push a lot of guilt onto them, and they get the brunt of it. I always say agents are a necessary evil. You can't do it without them. You're not going to go in as a 16-year-old, 18-year-old, even 32-year-old and start doing your own contract. So you actually need someone to do that for you. And that's where agents come in. You have it in every industry, but it seems like the football industry's agents are the ones who get battered.
You know what? So you're so right. And just to, I was with a colleague yesterday. Obviously, it's the transfer window, and we're trying to get business done. And he said something very apt. He said, we never parted the first shot. You know, you got to remember that clubs, the need for an agent arose when clubs started to dictate and underpay people's worth. And that's when people said, well, hang on a minute, I'm going to get someone who financially understands what I should be earning. And that was the role of the agent, essentially. That's where they started off. The role of the agent was never to transfer a player from one club to another. It was originally started off as trying to ensure that the client didn't get ripped off, essentially, and got the best deal that they could for themselves. So you're right, and you know they've been going on for years. They've always had representatives. They used to be family members or a lawyer. There was lots of lawyers that started off, but anyway, that's a separate subject matter for another time, I guess. But
for another podcast.
for another podcast.
Tantalizing everybody with the steps forward. Okay, so just kind of finishing off. I think, you know, one of the things that I always say as well when it comes to purpose and passion and fulfillment is this saying that I've always heard, that which I love, which kind of encapsulates what we're talking about here, which is successful people have this thing where success is getting what you want, but happiness is wanting what you get. And I just love that. Success is getting what you want, but happiness is wanting what you get. So there are a lot of people that do jobs that they're not necessarily passionate about, but because it's easy for them to make money. And you see that a lot with books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where the guy interviewed 700 multimillionaires and billionaires, and he found that every single one of them was unfulfilled and unhappy because money doesn't make happiness. So the most important thing when it comes to the hero's journey is, like what we've mentioned in regards to yourself as well, as passion, fulfillment, and getting something more out of what you're given, being in service to others. It's very important that you get that returned in income and finance, as we call it, currency. But the most important thing is that you love what you do and are also getting paid for it. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are just very good at something that they don't particularly like. And I think it's good that you're one of those people that is authentic in their passion because you've played both sides and love for the sport. So we'll kind of leave it there, and we'll get Mark back on hopefully when schedules allow, and we'll continue because what I really want to cover is the challenges that you've gone through specifically as in a football agent, and then the highs and lows, and then we might need 3 more podcasts.
That's fine.
Hey, that's fine.
That's fine. It's good that at least we get the story out.
Yeah, definitely. As Emile said, important to get this story out. So any last words from you guys that you want to share?
Well,
I'm fine.
I would just say thank you for having me on and thinking about me and my story. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to the next one.
Cool.
Thank you for coming on.
Okay, guys, until next time, this has been The Hero's Journey.
Hi, I'm Emile Heskey. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please share and like so we can share this message to the world.